Hey everyone, welcome to the Prophecy Roundtable. We don't have all the answers, but we will give you a good, entertaining conversation about the end times. And you are encouraged to put your comments and questions in the chat. Now, before we get started, I want to just give a big shout out to my patrons. Thank you. Thank you. You help keep the lights on and all that stuff. I mean, uh, just in case you didn't know, there's no trust fund or big money tree that's growing in my backyard. So you guys really do help make all this possible. Thank you. Also, we are taking a trip to Israel, April 7th through the 18th, 2024. So that's next year. You got time to save your shekels. If you want more information on that, go to thewaycongregation.com and you'll see the button that says Israel trip. All right. So just click on that and you are invited. But don't wait too long. The bus is filling up. And at this point, we're only planning on taking one bus. So that seats about 40, maybe 45. So just giving you a heads up there, it is filling up. And I think it'd be awesome if you guys could go. So keep that in mind. We do hope. I invite you, I want to say that you would come to the Way Congregation this coming Shabbat or join me online for that as well. You can get the Way Congregation app also from your Apple and Google stores. So check that out. Now, tonight we are talking about the rapture, the gathering, right? Whatever you want to call it, of the 144,000, the two witnesses, and Paul. All right. So this should be a lot of fun. And we have Tony back with us to help discuss this amazing topic. So, hey guys, hey Scott. Hey man, yeah. So yeah, where should we start? This is a fun topic, I think. And where do you guys want to get us started?
Well, I was actually talking to Tony earlier about the rapture or the harpazo of Paul. So maybe we start there, where we do see evidence of Paul being called up, if you will, or I'll even use the term rapture because the word is harpazo or harpazo. I think it's 2 Corinthians 12, first few verses. If you're going to pull up real quick.
I'm sorry, say the reference again there. Yeah.
2 Corinthians 12.
2 Corinthians 12. Okay.
2 Corinthians 12.
Got it. Thanks. Okay.
Yeah. And so in verse 2, and I believe Paul is being humble here. He says, I know a man in Christ who 14 years ago, whether in body I do not know, God knows. Such one was caught up to the third heaven, and I know such a man, whether in body or out of body, I do not know. God knows how he was caught up into paradise and heard inexpressible words, which it is not lawful for a man to utter. And so the Greek word there is harpazo, and not to get off into 1 Thessalonians 4:17 and that word not being harpazo. But this is an example in which Paul actually was raptured into third heaven, if you will. He was caught up into paradise and saw visions in the third heavens. And sort of what got me thinking on this, and this is where Tony will come in. We differ on this as far as this. This would be evidence, I think, of scripture where Paul was raptured. He was actually taken, and he didn't even know if it was his body or just in spirit, but he was raptured, given these visions in the third heaven, and yet he returned back to earth to finish his assignment, if you will, the things that he learned in his commission. And so how it relates to the two witnesses or the 144,000 would be, if they are the man-child of Revelation 12, is there could be a catching up, and yet into the third heaven, commissioned, sealed, sort of like Ezekiel, if you will, and then returned to earth, whether or not called up in the body or the spirit. And Tony believes they'll be transformed and become immortal. I believe that's possible, but I also see evidence from Paul where Paul was called up to the third heaven and yet returned in his fleshly state in his corrupted state and still kept living as a man, obviously with some supernatural giftings and powers, along with Peter and everybody else that the apostles had, that at least I don't have in my life. I don't. Nobody walks by me asking to touch my handkerchief, hoping that they're going to be healed.
Or your shadow.
I do see evidence that I believe, as it was at the beginning when the ecclesia wasn't born, but as the new covenant was being first implemented with signs and wonders, I believe so it will be at the end. And these 144,000, this man-child, the two witnesses, if you will, it's going to get, you've heard me say it before, Doug, it's going to get biblical up in here at the end. In other words, it's going to be supernatural. It's not going to be business as usual. I don't think there's going to be any cessationists at the end of the age saying that there's no, that the gifts of the Spirit have now ceased, and that was for the apostolic times. I believe it gets super biblical at the end. So that's sort of what got my wheels thinking, is there is evidence of a rapture, a catching up. And so that would be a witness in Scripture of that occurring, but they're not necessarily being a transformation into the incorruptible state like we see in 1 Corinthians 15. So Tony, tell me why I'm wrong.
Well, where do I start?
Go for it.
No,
you got about an hour, so go for it.
Nah, I'm just kidding. So one of the things that is very important, I think, is to connect the man-child to the 144,000. And so one of the best ways to do that is to connect them to the 144,000 through Revelation 14. So let me read. Let's look at Revelation 12:5. 12 verses 1 through 5 here. It says, it talks about in verse 2 that there was a woman and that she was with child. She cried out in labor and in pain to give birth. And then when we go down to verse 5, it says she bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. And notice what it says here. It says her child was caught up to God and his throne. And that is a harpazo, was caught up to God and his throne. And so right there, the first thing is to just notice what happened to the man-child. The man-child was caught up to God and his throne. Okay, so if we go over to Revelation 14, we're going to see that there was another group of people that were caught up. So Revelation 14, it says, I beheld a lamb standing on Mount Zion with him 144,000. Let's go to verse 3. They sang it as it were a new song. And then let's go to verse 4. These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And right here it says these were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb. And so where it says that they were redeemed from among men, that's thematically connected to Revelation 12:5, where it says that the man-child was caught up to God and his throne. And so those are talking about essentially the same event. And so
Tony, can you help me explain? Help me understand, though. I'm trying to understand the connection. Why are you making the case here?
Oh, okay.
That they're not. I know we've had this discussion, and I think your position is fascinating. Again, I'm not sold yet, but I think you make some great points. And I'm willing to listen to them and entertain them. But sell me on this. Tell me why there's a connection between what you just pointed out in chapter 14 and 12. Because again, you're making, I'd say, the assertion that the 144,000 are the man-child. I'm still sticking with it being Jesus, but we'll all see in the end who's right.
Told you he wasn't convinced yet.
You're right. He wasn't. Yeah.
but I love the conversation. I think it's fun, and that's why we're here, right, to talk about these things. So
right. So it says that her child was caught up to God in his throne. So there we have people or a person, let's say a person, people, whoever, is caught up to God in his throne. So they have been moved, they have been translated. So if we stick with what Scott was saying, the word harpazo, when it was used with Paul, what it meant was that Paul went from earth to heaven. And so same thing in Revelation 12. She bore a male child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, and her child was harpazoed. So there, and it says that her child was caught up to God and his throne. And so this child goes up to the throne.
I know of a place where such a child was caught up into the clouds, and the angels are
He's
like,
a grown
hey,
man.
Men
He's
of
a grown
Galilee.
man.
He was a grown man, Doug. It was 33-ish years later.
Yeah, it was 33 years later. Yeah.
So you're thinking a baby is going to be caught up?
No, not a baby at all. No, not a baby. But we're not going to get sidetracked on that. we'll come back to that.
Okay. All right. Continue, please.
So anyway, this man child, if it's one or more or whatever, but the man child is caught up. So this man child, this is someone or someone's who moved from earth to heaven. All right, so let's go over to Revelation 14. And in verse 4, it says, of the 144,000, these are the ones who are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. And the key verse is right here. It says, these were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God and to the Lamb, and in their mouth was no deceit. Now, where were they? Where were they taken up to? Again, they were redeemed from among men. They were redeemed from among men, first fruits to God and to the Lamb. And where are they? They're on Mount Zion up in heaven. Because it says in verse 1, I looked and behold the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. And so he's standing on Mount Zion. And it says that there are 144,000 that are with him. So they're with him standing on Mount Zion. So that's in heaven. And look at it says it twice. Look at the end of verse 3. Let's start with, they sang as it were a new song before the throne, before the living creatures and the elders, and no one else could learn the song except for the 144,000. Now notice what it says here. Now they're on Mount Zion, and it says these 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. So in other words, it's telling you that they were on the earth and now they're on Mount Zion. And then it repeats it at the end of verse 4. These were redeemed from among men. So it says they were redeemed from among men. They were redeemed from the earth. So again, that's exactly what happened to the man child. The man child was on earth, and then he went up to the throne of God. So that's how I connect those two, that they both specifically are called out as ones who were on earth and then were taken up to heaven. So that's kind of the connection that I made.
Hey Tony, let me ask you this. But you do connect the 144,000 that are sealed with the same 144,000 that are called up, correct?
Of course not. Are you serious? No, I'm kidding. Yes, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
when would the sealing? And again, this is where, again, I think you and I are actually agreeing more than we're disagreeing on this.
Oh, we are.
Because I think the sealing is sort of be like from in Numbers when we have the 1,000 from each tribe. They go to fight. I forget Midianites, or I forget who they're fighting. But anyway, 12,000. Yeah, 12,000 Israelites go off to war, and not one of them dies whatsoever. So I look at these as sort of these would be like Yah's through the stormtroopers, if you will. In other words, that they are going to be the special agent forces to lead all of Israel. And you want to be near one of these 144,000. If you're not one of them, I think you are going to want to be near one of them. And I think they're going to be like little mini Moseses, if you will. They're going to be specially commissioned. Mm-hmm. And so even if they're in their immortal state. So let's say they're in their mortal state. I believe they're sent back. Would you agree? They don't stay up in third heaven. They've got a mission to do here.
They've got a mission
in this age.
And I agree with that. I'm not sold on the man-child idea, but as far as the transformation of these individuals, I definitely am on board with that. In fact, I think the reason that they have one foot on Mount Zion, I see Mount Zion there as not being someplace you can go on a tour in Israel today, but it's the heavenly Mount Zion.
Absolutely.
That we see in the book of Hebrews, right?
Mm-hmm.
They've come to the New Jerusalem. So I think they're the first to get their new bodies, hence first fruits. They have a new body, and in that new body, they have the ability to be in the heavenly realm and this realm, just like an angel, right? Good angels can come and go at will. The bad ones they have to somehow get through a portal. They need blood. They need some kind of a seance. They need a ritual to be able to come through for a limited amount of time. But the good ones can come at any time, and they can even look like, some guy you're just entertaining, that's why we're told to entertain angels. So that's how I would see it. And I think the 144,000 are going to have these superpowers. I agree with you, Scott, that they're going to be around during the tribulation to, exactly what, call them the stormtroopers, call them the special agents, but they will probably be giving, aid and succor to those who are seeking it during that time, as far as I can tell. And the Antichrist or the beast is going to have a huge army of people that will take the mark of the beast. I argue that they will become genetic hybrids, and they'll have superpowers. And God's team only has 144,000. They'll probably go out 2 by 2, right? So we have 77,000 pairs. And they'll go out and they'll probably, be Boy Scouts and help people get to wherever they need to go across the street, get to safety, enter into your chambers until the indignation is passed. That might be one of their jobs. I don't know. But yeah, I think their role is going to be very interesting when we start looking at it in depth.
Yeah, let me hit something. You said something very specifically when you said you feel that that's the Hebrews Mount Zion, and you're correct, because look in chapter 14 in verse 1, it says, "I looked and behold a lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him 144,000." And then look at what it says. "They sang as it were a new song before the throne." You see, in verse 3. Mm-hmm. So in verse 1, so it's not a change of scenery here. It's that it's being referred to differently. In verse 1, "I saw a lamb standing on Mount Zion." And in verse 3, "They sang as it were a new song before the throne," because that throne is in Mount Zion. And so they are clearly up in heaven. And again, but where did they originate is the question. They originated on the earth, because it says that they were 144,000 redeemed from the earth, similar to, what it says about the man-child, how he was taken from heaven. He was from earth, he was harpazoed up to heaven. So definitely Mount Zion, I'm thinking along with you, Doug, that it's the heavenly Mount Zion.
And I was talking with Tony before, and this doesn't run into a problem of a first and second resurrection. Like pre-wrath and pre-trib both run into the same problems as having 2 first resurrections. Because Revelation 20 mentions a first resurrection, which you want to be part of, who will rule and reign with Messiah during the 7th year, the millennial period. But if you have a pre-trib and you have or a pre-wrath, they have this happening before the end of the age, before the and they run into a problem. Both of those teachings run into a problem of having 2 first resurrections and then not having a second resurrection until the end of the 7th day or the end of the millennium. So in this situation, you don't necessarily have a resurrection. You have a transformation. Again, I don't think the text precludes a transformation. I'm just saying that there is a biblical evidence of
Yeah.
a person being raptured and remaining mortal and fulfilling his commission. That would be the Apostle Paul.
And let's take the 1 Corinthians 4 passage, right? So my co-author Chris Steinley, in our book Reclaiming the Rapture, he does a deep dive on that word, and he can do it, give it far more justice than I can. But his major point on harpaz segometha, which is in the middle voice, is that it's not so much that you're being snatched, it's that something is being taken from you, right? So it's the difference between being kidnapped and being robbed. Okay. So what most Christians suggest is that the believers in 1 Thessalonians chapter 4 are being kidnapped, as it were. They're being taken. But really the emphasis of that word is that something is being taken from you. And what his argument is that the something being taken from you is death itself. So that it's a transformational verse versus a transportation verse. Okay.
Like a metamorphosis.
Yeah. I mean, that there will be a gathering. Sure. Okay. But the emphasis of that verse is transformation and not transportation. So, so thinking about that in light of the 144,000 who are also whatever raptured or whatever word we want to use here, I agree. I think that these are going to be the first to not experience, first en masse, to not experience death. Obviously Jesus is the first fruits. So these are going to be the first group that don't die, and they go straight to the new body, right?
It'll be like an instant death. This flesh must die, because flesh and blood can't. But you don't die of like natural causes, is what you're saying.
I don't know. I mean, I think when the Lord comes to get us, we're not going to die, right? Assuming that we're not dead, right? But if we're still alive, for those who are alive and remain, right, we're going to be metamorphosed.
We are changed from corruptible. So this corruptible, decaying fleshly, we don't die a natural old age death or gunshot wound death or car accident death, but this body will die. In other words, even if it's in
already
that
dying.
twinkling of an eye, in which you're changed, this corruptible body dies, even if it's an unnatural, supernatural death. They're still not going to inherit the kingdom. Flesh and blood cannot inherit the kingdom.
I can see where I won't say die, but it's going to be shed.
Yeah, that's a better word.
It will be shed, just like in a metamorphosis. How boom, it will be shed for sure.
Well, it's like a butterfly. Does a butterfly die, or a caterpillar?
It doesn't. It's the same creature though.
It turns into goo. It literally turns
DNA
into goo.
remains the same.
Well, the DNA is actually, it changes a lot. It has some radical changes. I mean, it turns into basically pus inside that cocoon, and it comes out something different. And it has something called imagines cells, I think they're called. So it's a radically different creature. But anyway, maybe we're splitting hairs here. I don't know.
Right now we are. Again, I just
we're gonna be changed. That's the point. Right? We're gonna be changed. All right. So there we go.
Behave yourself.
All right, Tony, go on, please.
So, hey, I wanted to show you guys something else in Revelation 14. Speaking of this, Scott, this will go. I mean, Doug, this will go along with Revelation 14. Actually, gives us 3 harvests. So Revelation 14, 1 through 5, that's what we've been talking about. And so that is the resurrection. I'm going to say resurrection / transformation, because I'm not sure, I'm not dogmatic on is one or the other or both. So, but these are the first fruits. These are the first fruits, as we just said. Now, if we go to verse 14, this is the harvest of believers right here. Then I look and beheld a white cloud. Oh, remember the white cloud, Daniel, right? And what Yeshua said, a white cloud, and on the cloud sat one like the Son of Man, Matthew 24. having on his head a golden crown, and in his hand a sharp sickle. Think of the parable of the wheat and the tares, right? Because the harvest at the end of the age. And another angel came out of the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So he who sat on the cloud, Yeshua, thrust in his sickle on the earth. This is Matthew. This is a picture of Matthew 24, where he says that the Son of Man will come in the clouds, and he will gather his elect from one end of heaven to the other. That's what's happening right here in 14. Now, we've already had verses 1 through 4 is the first fruits, because you always have a first fruits of a harvest. Now, here's something else that shows that these 14, in 14, 1 through 5, that they're resurrected is if we go to 1 Corinthians 15, 1 Corinthians 15, let's look around verse 42. And it says, so also the resurrection from the dead. Now, listen to this language Paul uses here. It says the body is sown, that's agricultural language, in corruption. And so if it's sown in corruption, we would expect him to say something is reaped. But he doesn't say that. He says the body is sown, agricultural language, but it is raised. That's resurrection. It is sown in dishonor, agriculture. So what you sow, you reap. Does he say reap? No, he says it's raised, because everything about the harvest that Yeshua talked about in the parable of the wheat and the tares, and in the parable of the sower, is all about reaping a harvest of saints, is all about the resurrection. And so Paul is using the same language of a harvest, but what he's showing us is he continues to say sown, but raised instead of sown and then reaped, because what he's talking about is the resurrection. So you got
literally being born again. In other words, literally, all of us were earthly born of women, in spite of what the gender politics wants to say right now. We all had mamas, and we will literally be born again, just like you just pointed out in 1 Corinthians 15. There will be a second birth. There will be a resurrection. We will literally be born again. That when the new covenant is fully, to use Chris Steinley's accounting term, realized. We're teaching and talking right now. Not all know the Lord. When it goes into full effect, I think it's at his coming at the end of this age, when what you just went over. But I got a question for both of y'all. Actually, do you believe? At least I do. If this first fruits does occur, and we look at the 42-month period, and we look at the 1260-day period. Do you see that first fruits happening on a future first fruits of the barley during Passover? And what you just went over, the second follow-up question, there was wheat mentioned and sickles mentioned. So that might be something that occurs on a future Shavuot when we're looking at the Moed.
Potentially. I believe it will be on a Moed, but I'm at present not ready to say which one.
Do you use sickles when you harvest apples and stuff?
No.
I think you just pluck them. You
just pluck them. Yeah.
So you do have the wheat and the tares. He says, let the tares grow amongst the wheat. And again, are they, and I'm not a bit, obviously, especially when it comes to the land in Israel and how long they harvest wheat, but is that wheat harvest, it's not the first fruits would be in the early summer or late spring, but it goes on for months and months, correct? So
I think
again,
the first fruit is we have the first fruits in the spring, right?
Late spring,
Pentecost or Passover.
Right.
Then you have
no, that's barley.
That's barley.
I know, but then you have it's still a first fruits. You still bring in some harvest,
right?
And then you have a sort of a main harvest, if you will, early summer, and then you have the latter,
right,
of the wheat.
So there's actually going to be two first fruits. There's
Yeah.
the first fruits of the
Yeah.
barley,
They're
and
both
then there's
called
going
first
to be a
fruits.
first fruits of the wheat.
Yeah.
And so that's why at present, I'm not, I don't know which is which at present. So we'll just keep studying that out. But the main point I want to make, though, is that this harvest is a resurrection. That's the main point, is that it's a resurrection. So Revelation 14, verses 1-5 is the first fruits of the resurrection. And then 14 through 16 is the full harvesting of the wheat. And then verses 17 through 20, that is the harvest of the grapes, or the clusters of the vine. And I think that's going to be Armageddon, where he gathers the wicked for destruction there. That's not a resurrection there. That's not a resurrection.
Yeah.
It's not a reresurrection. So
the
that is
grapes of
great.
wrath.
Yep. Oh, I love it. This is awesome, Tony. I don't know. I feel like somehow when I was studying eschatology, like we just didn't look at Revelation 14 very often. And I'm like, it says right there, it's going to happen right outside the city.
Right.
He's going to be squishing grapes just outside the city. Okay. If outside the city is Megiddo, then so is Denver. I mean, that's outside the city.
Right.
But right outside the city is the valley of Jehoshaphat. Guess what that means? Oh, I don't know. Jehovah judges. Oh my goodness.
Right.
And guess what? Guess where this valley of the valley of Megiddo, or of Armageddon, I don't know. Anyway, guess where that's going to be? He hasn't made it yet. He's going to put his feet on the Mount of Olives, and it's going to split. And that is when you have the Armageddon. Okay. So the Armageddon, Arema is a sheaf, Ge is a valley, and then Don is judgment. And so that's how I interpret Armageddon. I don't believe it's Har-Megiddon. Like I show that in my book, that there's zero linguistic evidence for that. I think it's a silly theory, but whatever. So I think Armageddon is a much better interpretation. Again, Arema being a heap of harvested wheat. Okay. Then you have Ge is the word like Gehenna, right? So that's the valley of, it's a trench, like a canyon. And when Jesus puts his feet on the Mount of Olives, guess what? He says in Zechariah that he says, then you will flee through my mountain valley, right? The one that he just made, that's the same word. And then the word Don is the infinitive absolute of the word Dan or Don, which means to judge. Okay. So it's going to be right there in the valley of Jehoshaphat, which is the Kidron Valley that exists currently.
Okay.
And then this new valley is going to be formed when he steps on it. And so you'll have a T right there. And that's where this whole thing is going to be happening. And then you see him trampling on the grapes. It makes so much more sense, because you need a narrow kind of receptacle to tread on grapes. You can't tread on grapes out on the flat ground. Guess where all the juice goes? It just goes everywhere. Okay. And so this is why I reject the whole idea of it being up in Megiddo. I mean, it's going to be some staging ground or something like that. It's just nonsense, So anyway, it's kind of exciting to look at all these harvests. I think that's beautiful what you're saying. I love it.
Yeah, it's pretty neat that it kind of gives you a bird's eye view here of all of the harvests. Like I said, whether it's the first fruits in the first 5 verses, or verses 14 to 16, the full harvest of Adonai's people, and then the harvest of the grapes of wrath for destruction. And it kind of goes back to, when Yeshua said, one will be taken and one will be left. And, that some people use that as a rapture. And it's like, well, no, the ones were taken for destruction, and so that's what's going on, I think, in verses 17 through 20.
That's really cool stuff. I like it. Scott, you have something to add?
Not really. I mean, maybe we could go back and look at Isaiah 66, which I think in Revelation 12 is really
and 63 as well.
Yeah.
Do you want to go to 66 first?
Yeah, you got to. It doesn't matter. We can go to.
Let's go to 63 because I think when I love putting this, I did all this in my books. It's really fun to put all this stuff together. It's like, look at all this, right? So he who is this comes from Edom with dyed garments from Bozrah. This is the one glorious in his apparel, traveling in greatness of strength. I who speak in righteousness, mighty to save. Why is your apparel red and your garments like one who treads in the winepress? All right. Now, I do think when he comes from Bozrah, he's already done some battle in heaven, but that's another story. He says, I have trodden the winepress alone, and from the peoples no one was with me, for I have trodden them in my anger, trampled them in my fury. Their blood is sprinkled upon my garments, and I've stained all my robes. For the day of vengeance is in my heart, and the year of my redeemed is come. I looked, but there was no one to help, and I wondered that there was no one to uphold. Therefore, my own arm brought salvation for me, and my own fury, it sustained me. I have trodden down the peoples in my anger, made them drunk in my fury, and brought down their strength to the earth. Can we just go to another passage really quick, which is Zechariah 14. I think it's very apropos. All right, so the Lord will go forth and fight with those nations as he fights in the day of battle. In that day, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, which faces Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east to west, making a very large valley. That's the word gay in Hebrew, Gei, for those who are wondering. Half the mountain shall move toward the north and half of it toward the south. Then you shall flee through my mountain valley. Okay, right here is the word gay. And so they're going to flee, right? And then he's going to do some serious butt kicking, right? And then it says, and this shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the people who fought against Jerusalem. Their flesh shall dissolve while they stand on their feet. Their eyes shall dissolve in their sockets, and their tongues shall dissolve in their mouths. All right. So all of that is just an incredible picture of what is coming. And Revelation 14 is the parallel passage. It's one of many parallel passages. Joel chapter 3 talks about the same thing, right? The valley, in the people who are in the valley of judgment, right? That is Jehoshaphat. We know exactly where that is. It's the Kidron Valley, So anyway, did you want to go to 66, Scott?
Yeah, go to 66 verse 7 and how this relates to this man-child. And so it's before she was in labor, she brought forth. Before she travailed, she brought forth. Before her pain came, she was delivered of a man-child. And then this is the verse that, again, I don't discount Judah being gathered in unbelief, because they had to be to fulfill verses like in Zechariah 14 and literally the last 4 chapters of Zechariah are extremely Judah-centric. But who hath heard such a thing? Who hath seen such things? Shall the earth be made to bring forth in one day, or shall nation be born at once? For as soon as Zion travailed, she brought forth children. So it appears that this man-child, as to what Tony believes and what I believe, that this man-child, or the sealing of the 144,000, occurs at the time that the Great Tribulation starts. In other words, for that 42-month period, that's when this man-child is caught up to heaven, sealed. Whether or not, and again, I'm still not convinced that they're going to be made immortal or not, but I don't think it really matters, because they're not going to necessarily die. They're going to be supernaturally protected from whatever the beast is going to throw at them. And they don't have, and this 144,000 have nothing to worry about from the trumpet judgments. I think that's the point of the sealing. So anyway, I just think that's obviously a parallel passage to Revelation 12 and the man-child before she travailed. So this, you wouldn't think that this verse 7 is talking about Yeshua, would you, Doug?
Sorry, I was
before she was in labor, she gave birth. Before her pain came, she delivered a male child. So certainly that's not Yeshua, is it?
I don't know.
Oh, come on. Is there any argument you can even make in Isaiah 66 for that being Yeshua?
All right. Well, so all right, let's go back. So so I no, I think, I see this I see the woman as being Israel. Uh, that Jesus is the one that is probably being talked about here, but I don't know. She delivered a male child. So who do you think it is, Scott?
I believe it's the male child that is sealed, called up at probably on a future Feast of First Fruits that kicks off this final 42-month, 1260-day, 3.5 year Great Tribulation period. Before she travailed, she brought forth. And I believe obviously these believers, and we're all on the same page here, we all understand that we're former pagans, we're former Gentiles, we're formerly other nations. We all understand that Israel, we are Israelites, flesh and blood Israelites, 100%, not just spiritual. And it's Israel that's giving birth to to this man child, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
It's not Mary. It's this would be Israel in this situation. And so, the nation being born in a day, again, Israel never ceased to exist. Certainly Judah was gathered in unbelief, but compared to what we see in Isaiah 11, when Judah and Ephraim are gathered back to the land,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's going to make what happened in 1948 pale in comparison. But again, I don't discount what happened. I look at it as a prerequisite for other prophecies such as Zechariah 11 through 14 to be fulfilled. Judah has to be in the land. They had to be in the land, but it's just not the fulfillment of prophecy yet. But it's certainly a conditional prerequisite, if you will.
I don't think we're too far on that one. I don't think we're too far.
So let me muddy the waters here then.
Oh boy. We just cleaned them up.
I've got to do it at least once tonight.
Exactly.
I've got to drop at least one bomb. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, I mean, for what it's worth, I don't think that this man child here, I don't think that this is speaking of the Revelation 12 man child.
What?
Oh,
I knew you.
Nice.
I knew.
Which man child is this?
Thanks. We should do a tag team. Tag me.
We do a tag team on.
Sorry, Scott.
No. All right. So here's the deal. So first
I like
of all,
you, Tony. This is great, man. You can hang out with us anytime. Okay.
There's one thing that I think is important to understand. At least this is what the Lord is showing me. There's more than one man child.
I agree.
Yeshua is a man child. I mean, no doubt. But there are, so what, let's go back to Revelation 12. Let's look at something. I'm going to tell you let's look at so there are four things that characterize the man child, but here's the main one. Look at this right here. Verse, right here, verse 5, she bore a man child. Here is the main characteristic of a man child. Who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron. Boom. That is the main characteristic of a man child. The man child is going to rule and reign and exercise Adonai's authority on the earth. That's why Yeshua is a man child, because he is going to be King of Kings and Lord of Lords. But there are other, but the man child of Revelation 12 is not Yeshua, but the man child of Revelation 12 is going to rule and reign too, because if you notice what it says in Revelation 3, look at Revelation 3:20. I'm sorry, look at Revelation 2:27. Let's start in verse 26. Revelation 2:26. Look at what it says. And he who overcomes and keeps my works until the end, to him I will give power over the nations. Now, Yeshua is talking about people other than himself. And look what he says in verse 27. He quotes from Psalm 2, which we know is about Messiah Yeshua. But look at what Yeshua is doing here. He is applying Psalm 2 to people other than himself. Look, he says, to him who overcomes, it says, and he who overcomes and keeps my work until the end, To him I will give power over the nations. He shall rule them with a rod of iron. They shall be dashed to pieces like a potter's vessel. That is taken exactly from Psalm 2, almost word for word. And we all know that Psalm 2 is a messianic psalm talking about Yeshua. But right here, Yeshua is telling us that Psalm 2 is not only about him, it's about these people here in Revelation 2:27, because that's where he got those words from, almost verbatim from Psalm 2. As a matter of fact, Psalm 2, I'm going to go, we can, if you can, you can bring that up or I'll read it. It's verses 8 and 9. So Psalm, well, let's look at something. In the beginning, why do the nations rage and the people imagine a vain thing? The kings of the earth set themselves, the rulers take counsel against the Lord and against his anointed. Boom, we know that's talking about Yeshua. Look at verse 6. Yet I have set my king on my holy mountain. I will declare the decree. The Lord has said to me, you are my son, to have begotten you. Boom, it's Yeshua. Ask of me, verse 8, I will give the nations for your inheritance. Now look at this, it's all Yeshua. And the ends of the earth for your possession. This is Yeshua. You shall break them with a rod of iron. You shall dash them to pieces like a potter's vessel. It's all about Yeshua. But what did Yeshua do in Revelation 2:26? He just told us that prophecy right there is not just about him. It's about these people who he said, if you overcome, Revelation 2:26 to Revelation 2:27 and 28. For those who overcome, he quotes directly from Psalm 2 and says they're going to rule the nation. They're going to dash them to pieces. And the reason why is because Yeshua said for those who overcome, which is 144,000, they are literally going to sit and rule and reign on his throne. Revelation 3 promises that to overcome. He says, to him who overcomes, you will sit with me on my throne. And so Yeshua is a man child, but other people are man. Moses was a man child, anointed, given authority. Adam was a man child. He was the first man child, because it says that he was supposed to rule and reign over the earth. He said, have dominion over all the beasts of the field, et cetera, et cetera.
Let me strengthen your argument.
I agree with
this. But this is Daniel chapter 7. So he says, and he shall speak pompous words against the Most High. Obviously, that is the beast. He shall persecute the saints of the Most High and shall intend to change the times and law. Then the saints shall be given into his hand for a time, times, and half a time. But the court shall be seated. They shall take away his dominion to consume and destroy it forever. And then the kingdom and dominion and the greatness of the kingdoms under the whole heaven shall be given to the people. The saints of the Most High, his kingdom is an everlasting kingdom, and all dominions shall serve and obey him. Now, it's interesting. I sort of got into a debate with somebody years ago about that passage, and he was saying that it's only talking about the saints, and I think I was saying it's only talking about Yeshua, and I think we were both wrong and right at the same time, that it's talking about both, right? The one on the cloud is Jesus, point blank, okay, period. But Jesus, very friendly guy, and wants to share his kingdom. He is going to include us. That's what's so mind-blowing, right? And of course, we see in Revelation 20 that we're going to rule and reign with him. It's not just Jesus ruling, but it's those of us who are called to be with him are going to rule with him, right? We never usurp him, we never outrank him, but it almost sounds like he's like, hey, come on, hang on the Father's throne with me. Like, really?
It's a
I get to be on your
co-ruling.
throne. That doesn't make sense to me, but that's his doing.
It's a co-ruling and co-reigning, which he is given. He's going to give that those chosen, the overcomers, those he chooses as the bride. And I believe there's going to be a lot of people that are going to be in the kingdom, and they're going to be shocked that they're not bridal material. I mean, we are not talking about a communist system. We were all taught in our denominations, and the majority of church teaches, if you're in, you're going to be one of those ruling and reigning. And I just don't see any evidence for that whatsoever. There's going to be servants, there's going to be guests, there's going to be those cast into outer darkness, there's going to be those who are told to depart from him. He never knew them in that way. But it doesn't say that that sounds like Bema Seat judgment time, not second death, lake of fire. So, not everybody that's saved is going to be the bride. Not everybody that's saved is worthy to be ruling and reigning. They might have different functions and statuses, like the wicked servant. It doesn't say, servant, you're no longer my servant anymore. To hell with you. Now you're going to be, resurrected in the second resurrection, and we're going to judge you, and you're going to die the second death. That person was a servant. He tells the friend, where are your wedding clothes? And that's where I think, and some of this is from my friends Mike and Curtis has been on the show with us before, but just some of their most recent teachings and just things I've thought about but didn't want to express out loud before, because it's considered heresy to even utter words that all believers are not the bride.
I'm just going to put you on screen yourself so they can't see me when you speak your heresies.
Yeah, take me off too.
Yeah. But I'm sorry. There's servants in the kingdom. There's wedding guests. Many are called, few are chosen. So when you start talking about, think about people that they haven't really, they've got that saving faith. Elisa did a teaching series recently where, all those who applied the blood of the Lamb were saved, but they didn't enter the promised land. They didn't reach the ultimate goal. Now, did it mean they weren't saved?
Right.
Well, no, they had faith, but then throughout the 40 years of testing, we saw 3,000 died after the golden calf incident. We saw many got swallowed up by the earth, and we see that in Revelation. We see those pictures about the earth swallowing up to protect the woman. So again, I think that what we see in Genesis through, especially the historical books and what's revealed in the prophets, is the house of Israel is pretty big, but out of that house, he's choosing a bride. And I'm not saying I'm bridal material, by the way, by any means. Why would I choose me? Much less, why would the King of the universe choose me as a bride? Not putting myself in bridal status, guys, by any means.
Right. So I just wanted to add one point. So I'm not saying that those who rule and reign that own. I'm not using the word that there's only a few who are going to be the bride, just because I would need to study that more. I haven't looked into that, but this is the one thing I would say though, is that I do believe that it's only, and I think, Scott, you're saying this also, it's only going to be the 144,000 that are going to rule and reign. Because in the church, we're taught that if we're believers, all we have to do is be believers, and that we're all going to be ruling and reigning. Well, I don't think so. It's just like, it's going to be those 144,000. Well, I mean, obviously you're going to need other leaders other than the 144,000. So let's say that, I don't know how Adonai is going to have, God's going to have the world set up, but they're obviously going to be cities. It talks about kings in the eternal state. It talks about kings bringing their glory. So there's going to be all sorts of levels of leadership, obviously, and it's going to obviously be more than 144,000. But as far as those who literally sit on the throne, as it says in Revelation 3, with Yeshua, it's not going to be all believers. And I really think it's only going to be the 144,000 who will sit on the throne. There will be other believers who will be leading in other capacities, but sitting on the throne, and I'm with you, Scott. I'm not 144,000 material either. I know that for a fact.
And I still think that 144K number might be representative. I don't want to limit Yah to only 144,000, and plus it does seem that those are people alive at the end of the age. And then I look at, I read books, and again, I didn't know them, but I read books by A.W. Tozer and Ravenhill and these great men of God that, I mean, if their books spoke the truth and what they lived and walked out, and again, I wasn't married to them, I didn't know them, but I get so irritated with these Toraterists that basically would take men of God like that still ate some bacon and did Sunday worship, and
Right.
they would have them cast it, they would have them second resurrection, books are open, and
Yep.
they're going to be cast in the lake of fire, and I have zero patience for that nonsense.
I agree with you 100% on that. I agree with you 100%.
Not 144%.
Yeah, 144 literal percent.
Hey, we got some questions before we go. This is from the Sweep, who pointed out that my math was off. I appreciate that. There will be, yes, I appreciate that. There will be 72,000 groups of twos, right? So, all right. Hey, I'm a theologian, not a mathematician. How many heavens are there, and are they just another word for dimensions?
I don't know. We only are told about a third heaven at most in Scripture. That's what Scripture tells us. But as far as whether or not there's 11 or a million or a billion or a zillion dimensions in heavens, I don't know.
I think it's just a general way to express where the birds are, where the stars are, and then where the other dimension is. So the third heaven is the other dimension that you cannot travel to in a spaceship, no matter how long you go for.
And I would say this, though: all the heavens are created, and they don't contain all of Yah. And we had that discussion with our friend Ken about that issue. He wants to put Yah in the heavens box. I'm like, he's much bigger than just his creation.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Wow. That is kind of mind blowing. It blows my mind every time when I think about before creation. Because when I was a kid, I used to think God was floating in space somewhere. And then he got this big idea to create stuff, and I'm like, why did he wait so long? I was a kid, but a lot of people still think that God was just floating along. And then he's like, I'm going to make some stuff. But no, he wasn't floating in space. There was no space. Okay. And what's interesting is that, or time, of course. And so what, Big Bang theorists will tell you is that the little dot that we talk about, the Big Bang, when it exploded, space was also in the dot. Okay. So where was the dot? Nobody knows. Okay. But space was in the dot. It's almost like maybe there was a God outside that dot. Okay. I'm okay if you postulate the dot, but where did the dot come from, and where was it? God. Okay. And so really God is his own dimension. He's the 10th dimension, timeless and spaceless. He's it, and he's unfathomable when we really start to think about who he is and where did all this stuff come from? The tables and the walls. God spoke.
Oh my goodness.
God spoke it, right?
Yes.
It's information that came from the mind of God. So it's not some other substance. It's God created. I mean, I can't even put the right word on it, but
he spoke it forth. He spoke it.
Word, so it emanated from him. Like, that's the mindset here. And quantum physicists discovered this as well.
Is Job, when Job is having his pity party and Yah gives him a smackdown, and he says, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth and the sons of God shouted for joy? Sons of God were created before the heavens and the earth, if we're to believe that text.
Well, at least the earth.
How can they shout for joy if, again, it's a pre-existence of all we know is in the beginning of what? In the beginning of what he tells us what is.
I don't think they were created before Genesis 1:1.
How do they shout for joy?
The foundations of the earth. Yes. Yeah. The foundations of the earth.
In the beginning,
God created the heavens.
Created the heavens and the earth.
Right. Yeah. Well, there's
where
two
were
different
you
things
when I
but we also see the formation of the earth. I did a whole study on this in case you're interested.
I know.
I did that for the benefit of our flat earth friends. Okay. Which we're not going to get into. I
No.
took a vow some years ago to not talk about that anymore.
Yeah.
Anyway, let's not go there. So, the question: when in this chronology of Revelation does the Joel 2 army come in? Will the two witnesses and/or the 144 battle this inhuman army? So, if I could, so the way I see it is, of course, I think the 144,000 are still just young men that are transformed. But the two witnesses in my book are, in my opinion, die at the midpoint of the 7-year period. They are then taken up, and then the 144,000, I think they get round 2. Okay, they get the second act of the play, if you will. And so 144,000 are in the first act. Wait.
Vice versa.
Two witnesses.
Scratch that. The two witnesses are in the first act. The 144K are in the second act. Okay, that's how I would suggest it. And the Joel 2 army is the same as the Revelation 9 200 million that come out of the abyss. If you look at it, they're both locust type, horse type, scary creatures, manticores that are coming out of the abyss. Really scary things.
I'm giggling right now because I know that some of the some of the charismatic crazies, they talk about Joel's 2 army being, that's them. They're the New Apostolic Reformation, Joel's 2 army. And I'm like, can you twist scripture any worse than that?
Well, there's a messianic song. I won't say who wrote it. It's a fun song, but it's also about we're Joel's 2 army, and I'm like, we don't want to be those guys. They're the bad guys. Okay,
Yeah.
Another question from Ruth. Do the 144K get transformed bodies, or since we are specifically told they are virgins, could they be the remnant mortals God uses to repopulate the earth? If not, who does repopulate the earth? Anybody?
On the repopulation issue, I believe that's a lot of that would be, Zechariah mentions the nation, those survivors of the nations that come against Jerusalem. There's going to be little kids that don't, get into this battle. They're too young. There's going to be others, I think, like mountain men hiding out in the mountains and stuff that somehow have evaded detection and capture from the beast system. And I believe there's going to be Judah would be a good example when they look to or upon him whom they pierced. On that, what I believe is that future Feast of Trumpets, Yom Teruah, when they see the sign of the Son of Man, and they're going to realize, okay, we missed it. And then they've got to survive the 10 days to get to Judgment Day, Day of Atonement. And those are going to be those that are in their human form that repopulate the earth. In other words, there are going to be those that have not taken the mark and worship the image of the beast, who somehow make it through to the end. And they're going to repopulate the earth. So if you come from a dispensational background, they don't see. It's like they forget that God is a supernatural God and he can do what he wants to do. And they don't look to all the miracles in Exodus and how Israel was protected in Goshen and Egypt got judged. And they can't fathom how Christians could survive that time period. And yet they also believe Judah does. So there's going to be survivors from the nations. I mean, that was always a verse, even when I kind of leaned a little bit dispensational, that it says there's survivors of the nations. These would be not Jews, not Israel. They're goyim that survive. People that are not in covenant that will make it into the kingdom.
And the first part of that question, yes, they're transformed, Scott.
and I would be like, I'm not sure. I wouldn't be dogmatic either way.
Yeah.
Let's see. I hope I didn't miss any questions.
You got one here. It said, H. Lum says, where does it say 7 years? Mrs. or Mr. H. Shalom, it does not. Our friend Doug is getting that from Daniel 9:27, and Revelation only mentions. But I will give Doug credit here. It does mention a period for the two witnesses. He's putting that at the beginning, and then he's tacking on the 42 months and the 1260 days also at the end. So that's where he's getting it from Scripture. I believe it's the final 3.5 year period, but that's just one area Doug and I differ on. So I used to agree with him, and then I realized I was wrong.
Yeah, that's a good one, Scott. That's a good one. I still think it makes the most sense. We have a 7-year period that Daniel clearly talks about. We have 2 terms of 42 months, 1260 days, whatever. There we go. Okay, better. All right, now Scott can't do his little charades here. So, I mean, I do agree that the Great Tribulation is the final 3.5 years. I agree with that. I just think that there will be a 7-year period at the end. The first 3.5 years are going to look, from the world's perspective, they're going to look like they are gaining the upper hand. But I think that is where the two witnesses come. This is God's shot across the bow. Hey, I'm about to come back. And he's going to send his two witnesses. He always sends a witness or two to speak of future judgment. And he's going to have, Moses and Elijah, in my opinion. They're going to be showing the world many of the natural disasters, shall we call them, such as no rain, the waters turning to blood. Those will be at the hands of the two witnesses. And I just don't know how you can have everybody running around at the same time when the show is all about the two witnesses, and they are the ones that are threatening the system that the beast is building. And so he must kill them, because they're threatening this utopia that he's trying to create, quote unquote utopia. And then he's going to kill them. I see that happening at the midpoint of this 7-year period. And then I think he's going to kill them. And I think he's going to go into the temple or some structure thereof. And he is going to boast that he's God because he just killed the two witnesses. And I think it's going to be quite the sales pitch. I think it's going to really go home for people. And then the two witnesses rise. The world's going to freak out. Oh no. And then they're going to be like, okay, everybody needs to become a god as well, just like the beast, because the two witnesses are going to get reinforcements, and they're going to come back with their king. And so everybody on planet Earth needs to be transformed so that they can fight these bad guys that are coming. The bad guys are Jesus, and the angels and all the good guys, right? But the script is flipped. So I just don't think that all of that stuff is going to happen in 3.5 years. I just don't buy that. But, hey, we're all going to find out one day how it all comes. But I've documented all of my views in Corrupting Image 2 and 3. So if you want to check it out, you're certainly welcome to. And it's coming out in Regenesis. And before we take off here, I have to give a commercial because it just wouldn't be right if I didn't. Regenesis code, dun, 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 it is available on Amazon for pre-order. So everybody check that out. Amazon pre-order. I'm terribly excited about it. It's coming out July 5th. So make sure you grab a copy. Again, just go Regenesis code, put that in Amazon Regenesis code, and you can get the discounted version of that before it comes out. So that's all I got, you guys. I don't know if you have any final comments before we end it tonight. So, Tony, anything to add? No, okay.
Just thanks for having me on again. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed talking with you guys.
We're glad that you came.
You said your mama had food cooking for you, so I'll be quiet now.
That's right, man. That's important. All right. Well, thank you, everybody. We're so glad you joined us again. Consider going with us to Israel. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be really fun. And think about it. if the world's going to be transformed later, you better go see it now, because it'll never be the same. All right. So this is your only chance to tour Israel as it stands today. All right. It'll all change in the future. So thanks for joining us. We will see you